Welcome everyone on behalf of Burnaby Village Museum and the Burnaby Public Library. Thanks very much for being with us tonight. Very glad to be together. I just want to start first by taking a moment to acknowledge that our session tonight is being held on the traditional and unceded territory of the Hunkaminam and Skokomish speaking peoples. And in fact, most of or all of what you'll see tonight in photos and stories was also taking place on that traditional territory. So my name is Kate. I am the assistant curator here at the museum. And my role tonight basically is just to welcome you here and be your host. We're hoping for an interactive session. You have an opportunity to speak with our presenter, and just a bit of housekeeping around how to do that. We're going to be using the Q&A function on your screen. So if you're new to Zoom, you just want to either move your mouse, if you're on a laptop or a desktop, move your mouse and you should see the Q&A button. You should see a menu come up and you should see a Q&A button. Try clicking on that and you should see a window pop open and a place for you to type your questions and comments. So you can use the Q&A function. We're not using the chat feature, so please just focus on that Q&A. And let's see here. And if you're also new to Zoom, those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live, welcome also. And if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, you can just use the comment feature like normal on Facebook that you would normally do. The only final tip I have for you, users of Zoom, is there's something called gallery view and speaker view. If again, you just move your mouse or tap your screen if you're on a tablet, you'll see something that says speaker view. It might also say gallery view. If you click that button, it'll give you a choice in seeing the speaker in a larger screen, in a larger frame, or the presentation, the slides, the photos in a larger way. So just take a moment to familiarize with yourself with that and get to know that feature. And finally, thanks to all of you who have been joining us for our neighborhood speaker series this fall. It's been great, and this is just one more excellent opportunity in that series, so thanks for being with us. All right, well, we're very fortunate to have Lisa Codd again here with us tonight to present her knowledge and research around Burnaby streetcars and interurbans. If you were with us last week, I said this before, but I really do think that Lisa is one of the most enthusiastic and knowledgeable Burnaby history people that I know, so I'm very eager to hear her presentation tonight. And for those of you who don't know Lisa, she's a heritage planner for the city of Burnaby. She holds a Master of History from SFU, and she was a curator here at Burnaby Village Museum from 2005 to just last year. So thanks, Lisa, for being with us. You can take it away.
Thanks, Kate. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Kate?
I hear you. Yep.
Okay.
And if anyone can't, go ahead and type in, but sounds good.
Okay. And can you see my slides?
Not yet.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, everybody.
No, take your time. There we go.
All great. Good. All right. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I'm also very appreciative to be here this evening on the unceded and ancestral territories of Hunkaminam and Skokomish speaking peoples. And I'm thankful to the staff at the museum and the archives who helped to source a lot of the images and the content that I'm showing tonight. And I also just wanted to note my appreciation for the members of the Burnaby Historical Society and the Friends of Interurban 1223. While neither group is functioning anymore, they've wrapped up. They did an incredible amount to preserve the history of the interurbans and streetcars in Burnaby, which I am forever appreciative of because, wow, it's fascinating. It's like my favorite topic. So I'm really thankful that I'm able to present this to you. I was saying to Kate earlier that like almost every slide I put in the slide deck, I was like, this is my favorite photo. This is one of my favorites, the one that I've chosen for the home screen here, because it really feels like you're sitting on the Interurban tram and going along for a ride. So I hope that's how you're going to feel tonight, like you're coming along for a ride through the history of Burnaby. So I want to start out by telling you a little bit about the interurban and streetcar routes in Burnaby. I'm going to start at the north and move down toward the south, so moving from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen, just to orient you in terms of what the various streetcar and interurban lines are that we're going to be talking about tonight. So at the top, highlighted in pink, is the Hastings streetcar extension, which was opened in 1913 and extended from Boundary Road to Ellesmere Avenue in North Burnaby, so close to Capitol Hill. In purple, we can see the route of the Burnaby Lake Line, which opened in 1911. It extends from Vancouver through Burnaby, skimming just below Burnaby Lake, and then curving into New Westminster, where it terminated at Columbia Street. The next line is highlighted in green as the earliest line that was constructed in 1891. And all those BC Electric Railway experts who are listening tonight are going to say, don't call it the Central Park Line. That's not what it was called when it opened. But for the sake of convenience, I'm going to call it the Central Park Line. Sorry, everybody. So the Central Park Line is in green, opened in 1891, and extended from Vancouver through Burnaby, and again terminating at Columbia Street in New Westminster. And then in orange below is the Eburn Westminster line. Eburn's an old name for Marpole. And that line was opened in 1909 and through Burnaby, ran through the agricultural lands in South Burnaby, just below Marine Drive. And you're asking yourselves, what about that little yellow line? Lisa, why didn't you talk about that? So the little yellow line is a streetcar line. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to refer to it as the Highland Park line, but again, it's sort of a more complicated story than that. That one, I'm not going to give it a date for now, but you'll hear about it more in the presentation. But it's a streetcar route that connected Burnaby to New Westminster as well. And we're going to start off talking about that Central Park line, the green line, which was constructed in 1891. And what I hope everyone will sort of leave the presentation with today is a sense that these interurbans and streetcars had a really profound impact on how Burnaby developed, and that impact can still be seen today. And so you say to yourselves, well, Lisa, transportation always has a large impact on any kind of development of a city, but I'm going to make the argument that it was particularly profound and enduring in Burnaby. So join me on that journey as I present that to you this evening. So 1891, the first line is built by the Westminster Tramway Company. They construct a streetcar line in Vancouver, a streetcar line in New Westminster, and then an interurban railway line to connect New Westminster and Vancouver through Burnaby. So this photograph is taken, so I should say that most of the route of this interurban through Burnaby, just looking at it again, that green route, is now the Expo line of the SkyTrain. So the right-of-way was reused for that. So right where the line enters into Burnaby and crosses over Kingsway, cutting through the corner of Central Park, that's where this photograph was taken in 1891. Maybe for a moment, I'll explain the difference between what a streetcar and an interurban line is, in case anyone is wondering. Because we had, as I mentioned, in 1891, there were streetcars in New Westminster and Vancouver, and then the interurban. So streetcars just generally are run only in one municipality, and they run along streets. And the interurbans, the inter is they connect one or more municipality. And the cars tended to be different as well. I would say, even though this is an interurban route, that the cars that we're seeing on this track are streetcars, which are small and have their wheels are located closer together so that they can easier maneuver on city streets. And the interurbans tended to be much larger vehicles meant for traveling between municipalities. I think this is a test run on that track in 1891. And of course, some of you may know, Burnaby was incorporated in 1892. So in 1891, there was no municipality of Burnaby. So in this case, the arrival of public transportation arrived in Burnaby before there was a Burnaby. So public transportation actually predates the founding of the municipality of Burnaby. So it's Burnaby's real function in the construction of this line was it was the space between Vancouver and New Westminster. The goal of constructing this line was to connect the larger centers of Vancouver and New Westminster to each other, and Burnaby just happened to be in the middle. What was located in Burnaby was the powerhouse and the tram barn. So this is the tram barn where the cars were stored overnight. And this was located where Powerhouse Park is in Burnaby today. So you can visit the location where this was, quite close by to where BC Hydro is still located in Burnaby, their main building. And the powerhouse was located here as well. And also a boarding house where workers who ran the line or the workers who built the line could stay. And the electricity for the line actually the powerhouse that was located here, the electricity was generated by burning mostly wood, although I think it also could have burned coal, which would heat up a boiler, which would make steam, which was used to operate a turbine that created electricity and ran the tram. So a very inefficient way to generate electricity, but that's what they did in the early days. So not long after the Interurban Railway was constructed, people began wanting to profit from it by purchasing land in Burnaby and subdividing it and selling it to other people. So land speculation came along with the construction of the Interurban Railway. But you can't build roads and create subdivisions and do all of that kind of stuff if you don't have a local government. So the municipality of Burnaby actually came to be because investors and owners in the railway petitioned the government for that to be created. And this photograph is actually taken at the boarding house, on the steps of the boarding house that was built to serve the railway. And this is Burnaby's first municipal council who met at the boarding house from time to time. So you can see that real close relationship between Burnaby's early government and the Interurban Railway. So just going to go back to the map for a second. So the original route of the Interurban Railway followed the Green Line up to Edmonds and Kingsway. So the yellow line. So the yellow line is basically part of the first line when it was constructed in 1891, and then where it joins the green line moving west, that's the rest of the railway line. So the original line came down the same route that the Expo line takes today, and then at Kingsway and Edmonds it curved. Crossed Kingsway and Edmonds, went down Edmonds Street to 6th Street, and then down the hill of 6th Street into New Westminster. So not coincidentally, a man named Henry Edmonds was one of the investors in the Interurban Railway, and it's largely because of him and some other investors who had property in that Edmonds Street area that route was chosen. And so again, that's sort of that bringing together of the desire to develop land, and that's tied into the public transportation system. What did I want to say about this? Okay, moving on. So this is a photograph in 1894, also one of my favorites. And this is one of the stations along Edmonds Street, and this is at Douglas Road, which is now Canada Way. So Canada Way and Edmonds, there was a small stop for the Interurban Railway, and farmers in the area, including the farmers who grew fruit and produce at Deer Lake, would bring their produce by wagon up to that station and load it onto the BC Electric Railway freight cars. So often when we think about the Interurbans, we think that it's just a passenger service, but actually there was an incredible amount of freight that was moved around. So this is in 1894, and there was already some farms located at Deer Lake. So this became an important, that intersection of Douglas and Edmonds became really important, as did Kingsway and Edmonds. So that whole area was really the center of town. Also located at Douglas and Edmonds was Burnaby's first school, built in 1894. And a way that you can still see the legacy of the line is at this corner. So if you ever traveled along Edmonds and then taken the corner onto 6th Street, you'll notice that they don't join at a right angle, that there's quite a wide and gentle curve from Edmonds down onto 6th Street, and that was so that big interurban could easily make that corner. So the shape of the track influenced the shape of this corner and this intersection, and you can still see that in Burnaby when you're traveling through the community today. And the other intersection that I wanted to talk about is at Edmonds and Kingsway. So here we are at the corner of Edmonds and Kingsway. We're on Edmonds here, and if we were to go straight ahead, we would be heading north, and if we were to turn right, we would be heading into New Westminster on 12th Street. So the road we know as Kingsway becomes 12th Street once you cross over into New Westminster. So if we turn right, we'd be going down Kingsway towards 12th into New Westminster. And so you can see that the track actually is going in two locations. You could go straight ahead onto Edmonds, or the track also is curving to the right to go toward New Westminster on Kingsway. And that's because they rejigged the line in 1896 so that it no longer went the original route. Now the main interurban line went down Kingsway, 12th Avenue into New Westminster, but there was still a little streetcar that operated on the original track. And that intersection, the streets are not at a right angle there, so it creates these triangle-shaped properties. So you can see that building there on the northeast corner of the intersection, called the Triangle Block, was a triangular-shaped building that responded to the shape of that intersection. And you can also see all of the poles. So the poles, the electric poles that are there to operate the line. So sometimes you can still see poles that look just like those poles in areas where the electric railway used to operate. So there's another photograph of the Triangle Block and of the tracks on Edmund Street. So that's Edmund Street in the foreground, that the original interurban line went down, and then later the streetcar line. And if you, so this, one thing I like about this photograph is you can see you can see a horse in the photograph. This one. So we have sort of this modernity of like electric interurban railways, and then also travel by horse, all happening at the same time. This photograph was taken in 1912, by the way, and by this point, that corner of Edmonds and Kingsway was really becoming the busiest intersection and the center of town in Burnaby. And if you were to stand on top of the Triangle building, you would see this. And this is scanned from a newspaper, so I'm sorry the quality is not fantastic, but this is a really neat panorama photo that was taken from the top of the Triangle building. So right across from that intersection, that beautiful fence that you see surrounded Burnaby's Municipal Hall, built in 1911 at Edmonds and Kingsway. On the left side of the photo is the Edmonds station, the interurban station. And there's a little tram barn located there as well. And you can actually see the tram out front of the station. And then the street heading off into the distance, of course, is Kingsway. One of the first roads constructed in Burnaby in the 1860s. And again, you can see those electric power poles. And if you look really far in the distance, actually you can see a water tower as well. So there's a little bit of the story of Burnaby's early waterworks system to be told in this photo too. So I wanted to, in addition to sort of talking about the railways themselves, I want to talk about the ownership of the railway. So when the Interurban Railway was first built in 1891, it was not built by the BC Electric Railway Company. It was purchased, it was built by another company, the Westminster, I think it was called the Westminster Tramway Company. And there were several companies that, that tried to make a go of the interurban railway and those streetcars in New Westminster and Vancouver, but they had trouble securing enough capital to run it. It was an expensive business. But stability finally came in 1897 when the streetcar lines and the interurban were purchased by the BC Electric Railway, a corporation with deep pockets, with access to British capital. And they also built, they had a really smart business model. So they weren't just running streetcars and interurbans, they were also generating electricity, and they were selling domestic electricity and appliances, electric cars, anything that they could sell to get people consuming electricity. So that was a successful model that saw rapid expansion of the railway system. And one of the things that they did was in 1904 they constructed the Bunsen Lake Power Station. So by 1904 they were able to retire those wood burning generating station and have electricity from Bunsen Lake power the tram line. And the electricity came across Burrard Inlet to Barnett and was relayed along the Barnett, what's now the Barnett Highway, and then what we now know as Sperling Avenue was constructed called Pole Line Road to bring the electricity to the other side of Burnaby to power the electric tram. So that was a big change in terms of how things operated. Another change in the BC Electric era, it was in 1912 when the route was changed again. So the orange route remains that Central Park line. And so now you can see at Highland Park where that dotted line comes off of the line, that now the route goes on a gentle hill, goes on a gentle slope down Connaught Hill and into New Westminster. And this is exactly where the SkyTrain goes today. So that was achieved in 1912. And that's how that continued to be the route until it closed down. This is an example of a couple of the stations that were on there. This is the Patterson station. There were two tracks, so one train could be going one way and one could be going the other way. And so there's a little station serving each one of those lines. And they're really just a shelter from the rain. There's not anything too fancy about either of these stations. But what became really important to Burnaby, you can see where the interurban line is crossing over into Burnaby at Boundary Road, and that you can see Kingsway. So the area between the interurban line and Kingsway became a really prime area for development, with lots of commercial businesses and lots of industrial development as well. So most of Burnaby's big early industries were located around Kingsway and the Central Park line and in the area between, to take advantage of that transportation network. So companies like the food distribution company, Kelly Douglas, that some of you may have heard of, among other things, they produce the Nabob tea and coffee products. At one time, Ford Motor Company had a small plant here. Electrolier had a plant here. And freight was as important, if not more important, than the passenger service in terms of the profits from the line. And a lot of those industrial customers had their own siding, so the freight car could pull off and they could load or unload goods and then rejoin the line. And when passenger service on the Central Park line closed down in 1953, service continued long after. I think it was well into the 70s and maybe even the 80s that there was still freight operating on that line. So I wanted to took a look at aerial photos. I really wanted to find an example of a business with a siding on this line, because I've talked about this in lectures before, but I've never actually had an example. So I did manage to find one. This is a photograph today, and we're looking right over top of some large kind of condo buildings. At the top of the building is Burn Creek Ravine, And to the right is the Edmonds SkyTrain station. So where you see 18th Avenue and a parking lot and a long thin strip building, that's the Edmonds SkyTrain station. So just to locate you where we are. And this is what it looked like in the 70s. It was the Dom Glass, the Dominion Glass manufacturing plant. So you can actually see on the right side then there, the track where the Edmonds station is now, that was then the BC Electric Railway track, and then a curving line of track, the spur coming right off of that track and right into the Dominion Glass property. So Dominion Glass was established in the 1950s. In 1954, Burnaby's council approved a proposal from the BC Electric Railway Company to install that railroad siding from the plant. So that's a year after passenger service had closed down. They're still expanding the freight service. And Dom Glass stayed in business until the late 1980s, early 1990s, which was a period of deindustrialization in BC. That saw a lot of these businesses close down. So this is a picture of sort of a rendering of the Dom Glass plant that I found in the Vancouver province. So there it is in 1964. And you may have something from Dom Glass in your homes. Kate, I bet you have some at the Burnaby Village Museum. So I just included a little photograph of a Dominion canning jar. So they made a lot of different glass products. And if you wonder, could my thing have been made at Dominion Glass? If there's a little diamond-shaped mark on the bottom with a D in the center, that's it. That's the Dominion Glass mark. So this huge company made all sorts of glass products right here in Burnaby. Closed down in the late 80s, early 90s, as I said, which is when sort of BC experienced a period of deindustrialization. In 1986, of course, the electric railway right-of-way that had been that freight line became the expo line of the SkyTrain. So we see Burnaby's economy start to shift at that time as well. And a lot of changes just in that part of Burnaby. As we all know, the whole sort of Metrotown area has undergone incredible change in the last 20 or 30 years. And that period of deindustrialization, for example, allowed the Metrotown Mall to be constructed, where Kelly Douglas and Ford Motor Company and Electra-Lear had been located. And empty warehouses actually really gave a boost to the early film industry as well. So when industrial businesses moved out, the film industry moved in the 70s and 80s. So some people might remember 21 Jump Street with Johnny Depp. So they filmed, for example, in an old warehouse in the Metrotown area when that show started going. So I'm going to talk now about the Highland Park route. So you'll remember that the Highland Park route was kind of a spur off of, or sort of was related, sorry, it's related to the Central Park line. So that yellow line originally was part of the Central Park line, and then when the Central Park line route changed, it became a streetcar line. So this map shows sort of the configuration after 1912. So at the Highland Park station, you could either continue on the interurban railway line, the Central Park line into New Westminster, or you could disembark and connect to a streetcar line that would take you across Kingsway, down Edmonds, down 6th Street, and into New Westminster. And because that was such a busy station, that station wasn't just a little shelter like that one I showed you at Patterson. It was a busier station, and it actually had a store called the Dinky Store, owned by the Thold family, and that's Margaret Thold, outside of the shop, where no doubt her parents made her labor on weekends and evenings. My parents owned a store when I was growing up, so I feel a connection to Margaret Thold. So the Highland Park station was a busy little station, and that line, the Highland Park line, through Burnaby now, between what used to be the Highland Park station and Kingsway and Edmonds, is now the Highland Park Trail. If any of you have ever hiked on it, and the railway right-of-way below the SkyTrain, where the Central Park line operated through Burnaby, is also a trail. So there's walking and biking. So it's still part of our transportation network. And if you do walk or bike along there, watch for track. A lot of the original track actually is still intact, and you can see pieces of it when you travel along those walking paths, which is really neat. So we're going to go on a little journey down the Highland Park line, down across Edmonds and down 6th Street. And here we are at 6th and 12th. So we're on 6th Street looking north. And this is one of my favorite photos. And on the right-hand side there is Cliff's Can Factory, which was an enormous supplier of cans in early British Columbia. And there's a few things that I just totally love about this photo. So one of them is that you can actually see the freight car on its siding outside of Cliff's Can Factory, which is really rare. Nobody hardly ever took photos of the freight car. So it's neat that we give a little look at that. And you can also see the streetcar just peeking over the horizon of this photograph as it's traveling down the street. And you get an idea, you know, again, of this sort of contrast between modernity and lack thereof. So we have this electric streetcar, which seems so modern, but you know, there's not really much of a road. There's a bunch of bushes growing. There's no sidewalks. So it's again, you know, in Burnaby, we really see the streetcars and the Interurbans come in advance of population growth. So Burnaby ends up growing up around these lines. The lines aren't sort of built to serve Burnaby. Burnaby sort of grows up around them. And you can see that in this image. Shall I tell this story? Sure. I've got a little quiz for the people listening. So I went and looked on Google Earth at a picture of what this looks like today to see if the poles are still there. And there's still poles that look just like these ones, but they're on the other side of the road. And I was sort of confounded about this. Like, do I have the picture backwards? Was the can factory on the other side of the road? So it took me a few minutes to think of the answer, but there's a good reason why they're now on the other side of the road. Does anybody know?
Just give folks a minute to type.
Okay, and I just peeked at the Q&A too while people are typing, and there's a question from Chris Al wondering where the Triangle Building is. So the Triangle Building was at the corner of Kingsway and Edmonds, and it's on the, I have to grab my sense of direction, on the northeast side of that intersection. Okay, do we have a winner? Yes, good job. Yeah, so Kobe knew that it's because they switched sides. So cars used to travel not on the right side of the road, but on the left side of the road in British Columbia until like 1922, 1923. And so when car traffic changed direction, they also changed the ways that you boarded the Interurbans so that you weren't boarding onto traffic. So they actually would have shifted all of that infrastructure once that change took place. So that's why they're on the other side of the road. Good job, Kobe. And I will pause in I see there's some other questions, so I will pause in a second to answer some additional questions. Uh-oh, my slide is not advancing. There we are. Okay, so I am gonna, in a moment, leave the Highland Park story and talk about the Eburn Westminster line. But should I stop for a second, Kate? Are there any questions?
We can just pause here. Just kudos to Robin, who also knew about left-hand change right 22. And a comment from Christine, who shares, I don't know if you want to comment on this, but she's saying the Triangle Building might have been Cunningham's drugstore in the late 1950s and early 60s. The doorway remained as the photo shows it. So.
Okay. Yeah, neat. Yeah, there would have been like a lot of different businesses in that location over the years. And it's not the only triangle-shaped building in Burnaby. So when you drive around sort of where those tracks were, it's not unusual to find those sort of triangle-shaped buildings, and that's why they're there. they're responding in some way to the intersections between the roads and the interurban railways. So it's kind of neat when you find them. So the Westminster Eburn route, as I said, was built in 1909, and this really was a freight route. The reason it was built was, again, to sort of connect Vancouver to New Westminster through Burnaby, and this was a more level route than the Central Park line, so it was easier to move heavy freight cars along this route than it was, up and down the hills of the Central Park line. So you should be beginning to see a theme here of all these tracks, these routes that are running through Burnaby from east to west. So this is sort of our story where a lot of our transportation infrastructure was built to get people through Burnaby or to get goods through Burnaby rather than to serve Burnaby. And so this is definitely an example of that that happened here. So this is an aerial photo from 1930, and it's so cool to have an aerial photo this early, and this shows what that route looked like through South Burnaby. So the blue line at the bottom is the Fraser River, and the white sort of squiggly line that goes sort of somewhat along the top of the photo, just below the top of the photo, dipping down toward the right side, is Marine Drive, and the really straight line that goes from one side of the photo to the other is the interurban railway line. So you can see most of the time that the Eburn Westminster railway line is going through Burnaby. It's going through the middle of nowhere. It is not serving passengers. It is not serving sort of nearby populations. You can see Burn Road, which is the most prominent road that crosses the interurban line, and also I think it's Willard, the one that's closer to the right, where there were some smaller properties, but mostly this route is running through Burnaby, delivering freight, although there are some passenger trains that go on it as well. And I'm not sure how used it was by the local farmers. So we do know there's a lot of Chinese Canadian farm families that operated farms within the sort of Big Bend area, as we know this. And they tended to be small farms that were farmed intensively with produce that were taken to market. And when we hear the sort of early stories of the operation of those farms, they are often talking about using a truck or a wagon to get produce to a distributor. I don't think I've had come across a single story from this part of Burnaby using the interurban railway like we saw with the Deer Lake farmers in that earlier photograph with the freight car. So my feeling really is that this did not serve the people of Burnaby so much. It was a line that moved through Burnaby. But it was a very well-used freight route. So on the Eburn or Marpole side, there was another route that connected to Vancouver, so freight could have come that way. There was a route that connected to Richmond and Steveston, so salmon from the canneries, for example, canned salmon would be transported along this route. I like to imagine they bought their cans at Cliff's Can Factory, again, shipping by the Interurban. And on the other end in New Westminster, a year later in 1910, the route to Chilliwack was built. So the Interurban Railway actually went as far as Chilliwack. And so it was this incredible regional transportation system, and this was part of its connection to the region. And this is the other thing that I learned in this presentation that I did not know before. That particular railway line is still in operation. So after the BC Electric Railway stopped using it for passenger service, it remained in use for freight. And then, so the BCR stopped using it in 1956 for freight. In 1961, the government of BC took over the BC Electric Railway Company to create BC Hydro, and they ran the freight service on the line for a number of years. And then in 1988, BC Hydro sold the rail lines to Southern Railway, and they still use this line today for freight. So this is the only line that's still operating on the ground, although obviously the SkyTrain up the Expo line is an example of a line that is in some ways still operating too. Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about the Hastings Street extension. But how are we doing for questions, Kate? Do you think I should pause for a moment?
Just have a look here.
Okay.
Here's a question, sort of in a general sense, about the passengers from Robin. So she's wondering if you have any info about what happened during the Spanish flu and if passengers would have had to wear masks. And she shares the only reference I could find was an order by the BCR to keep the windows open, and that happened in other cities too, all over North America. But anyways, so that's an interesting question, and she's enjoying this webinar.
Yeah, cool. I do not know the answer to that, but we should try to find out the answer to that. A lot of the old, the buzzer, you know, if you go on the SkyTrain or any transit in our region today, they still have the buzzer as their newsletter. So the buzzer was the BC Electric Railway newsletter, and a lot of those are scanned and available online. So I'll have to check that out for like 1918, 1919 and see what we can find. If we find something, we'll post it on the Facebook site. Thanks, that's an excellent question. So the line I'm going to talk about now is the Hastings extension. That's going to be the last one that I talk about. So it's the one in pink at the top of your screen that went from Boundary to Ellesmere Avenue along Hastings Street. So this line was opened in 1913, but the story actually begins in 1909 when a streetcar from Powell Street in Vancouver along Hastings Street was constructed to Boundary and terminated just short of Boundary. So streetcar service to that part of Burnaby sort of arrived in 1909, so passengers could at least get that far and then travel the rest of the way on foot. So this led to real interest in property development, subdivision, settlement in that part of Burnaby. So Capitol Hill was subdivided into smaller lots that were available for sale by 1909, and the northwest corner of Burnaby became an exclusive subdivision known as Vancouver Heights. Vancouver and Heights to market it for its proximity to Vancouver and then also for its spectacular views. And some of you might know the Overland Mansion, spectacular mansion in that part of Burnaby, was built by the owner of the real estate developer who built Vancouver Heights as a showpiece for the neighborhood that he hoped would become the new Shaughnessy. Oh, actually, this map shows they call that neighborhood Vancouver Heights on this map as well. So that now we know it is Burnaby Heights, but it started off known as Vancouver Heights. And so when the Hastings Streetcar extension opened in 1913, you couldn't travel all the way from Powell Street to Ellesmere on the same streetcar. You had to get off at Boundary and change streetcars, have a short walk, get on a different streetcar and go the rest of the way. So the line didn't connect. They were two completely separate lines. So that corner of Boundary and Hastings became like a really busy place, and we saw a lot of commercial activity there. So this is one of my favorite photos too. So this one's from the 1940s, Boundary and Hastings. This is the Burnaby side, and it would be the south side. So you can actually see on the very edge of the left edge of the screen, the streetcar, people getting off. There's like a little coffee shop, and behind there is the Kwan Brothers green grocery store. So there was actually quite a number of Chinese Canadian-owned green grocery stores on Hastings Street. So that's one of those businesses. So this is a busy little spot at that point. But it wasn't always busy. So this is the end of the line at Ellesmere in 1913. And we can see, again, this whole idea that the streetcar lines really came ahead of settlement and development. So there's really not much going on at the corner of Ellesmere and Hastings. Hastings at that point is a plank road. And you can see the single track. This was never a double track, I don't think. I think it was always just a single track. And you can see Burnaby Mountain far off in the distance. This was a pretty isolated part of Burnaby at that time in history. But Hastings Street definitely became, because of that I think this is the streetcar line that wasn't just about getting people through Burnaby. This was the streetcar line that really served Burnaby. And so that whole Hastings Street area saw a lot of commercial development along Hastings Street and residential development, especially to the north of Hastings. Shop owners tended to live in the neighborhood. People who lived in the neighborhood tended to shop at the stores. So there was a real community focus that developed around the streetcar line there. This is the 3900 blocks. This is between McDonald and Inman on Hastings. You can see the track and the road. Here, we've got real sidewalks and these little stores. And behind the stores were often apartments and residences. Sometimes it was the owner, sometimes it was renters who lived above or behind the various buildings. And an early Safeway. Who knew we had Safeway that early? We did. And just a couple doors down from Safeway is the Burnaby Market, another Chinese Canadian owned green grocery store that was in the neighborhood. The streetcar line on Hastings Street closed down relatively early in 1949 as part of what was known as the Rails to Rubber campaign. So this is a 1955 issue of the Buzzer called the Rails to Rubber issue. So they were actively decommissioning the streetcars and the Interurbans in the 1950s and moving people to buses. And this was one of the early streetcar lines to be closed down, the Burnaby streetcar. But the neighborhood adjusted, and after the Second World War was an enormous boom time in Burnaby for suburban development. So the late 40s, early 50s, the whole area south of Hastings Street, so like between Hastings and Lougheed, there was a ton of suburban style subdivision development that happened in that area. Car ownership grew. People were also commuting on Hastings from areas east into Vancouver, and that car traffic attracted new types of businesses and neon signs. So things like the Swinging Girl neon sign that belonged to the Helen's children's wear store, for example, emerged in that era. So this little commercial district actually survived sort of the streetcar closing down and continued to thrive. Oh, and I told you it was the last line I was going to talk about, but I lied. There's one more line, which is the Burnaby Lake line, so it's in purple on your map. So starting in Vancouver, connecting to New Westminster through Burnaby. You can see it in purple on there on the map. It was constructed in 1911. Again, moving people and goods through Burnaby, but also intended to help develop central Burnaby, but it didn't really work. This was sort of the forgotten line, and that the sort of incredible growth and settlement that we saw in other areas did not follow the Burnaby Lake line. This remained quite a rural area of Burnaby. And this image really sort of shows it spectacularly. So this is in the 1920s, and it's the another Douglas Road station. This one located where Douglas Road crosses the Trans-Canada Highway today. So again, there's really not much development or settlement around this station. So that's what it looks like today. There's the Douglas Road overpass across the Trans-Canada Highway. And on the left hand of your screen where the overpass has just come, you can see some wooden poles. So those wooden poles are really neat markers when you're traveling along the Trans-Canada Highway. Of course, you should be focusing on the road, people, but you can take a look at those poles and they'll show you the route of where the interurban Burnaby Lake line went. That line closed down in 1953. And these are the kids from Douglas Road School on the last trip on the Interurban. And so this was a huge deal for Burnaby when these lines closed down, and people definitely had a sense that they were marking an important part of history. And the line is still with us, though, in a way, when we look back at the map, so that the most of that purple line through Burnaby from Boundary to Caribou is now part of the Trans-Canada Highway. So the right-of-way for that line is still a really important part of our transportation network. And I think that's sort of the thought that I want to leave you with today, that while the lines are gone, the impact of the lines on the development of Burnaby really remains visible. And two of those lines, the Central Park line and the Burnaby Lake line, are really important transportation corridors to Burnaby today. They decommissioned lines, some of them became bike and pedestrian trails, some of them are still operating as freight lines, and they created neighborhood commercial districts like along Edmonds and 6th Street and Hastings Street that are still an important part of the history and character of our community. And the interurbans and the streetcars remain a valuable part of our historical consciousness, including, the incredible community effort that went into restoring the Interurban 1223 car, which is on display at the Burnaby Village Museum. And I like to think that these streetcars actually created another really important legacy, which is that Burnaby remains a place committed to public transportation and to building our community around public transportation routes. So that's the end of my talk, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So informative, and those photos are great. Just like so, there's so much. I really appreciated how you share what you like and the details. It was really cool. So. But yeah, we definitely have a few minutes. If there's any last questions you want to, there's a few that I'll go back to here, Lisa, but please do go ahead. Those of you who are with us, type in any questions or comments. I just want to go back to one from Larry. He's pointing out on the Burnaby Lake line. He's pointing out on the purple line.
Yeah.
It's Vance, and he wondered if is that a typo? Like if you look, Burnaby Lake.
Oh, yeah. It is a typo. It's Vorse. It's Vorse Station.
Okay.
The Vorse Station, of course, is at the Burnaby Village Museum now with the tram. It was restored. I don't know why they called it Vance.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of, spelling errors in this stuff over the years, and they kindly would name something after someone and then spell their name wrong. But yeah, the Vorse Station was right at the foot of Nursery Street. So if you go down to the bottom of Nursery Street today on the south side of the highway, you can sort of see where I actually was wondering if there might even be like a foundation or something in there if you were to sort of tromp around in the bush enough. But there's sort of a power pole in the middle of nowhere in the bush. I'm sure it must have been the one that served the station. And then the station got dragged by the Lubbock family. They dragged the station up onto their farm, and they used it as an outbuilding for a number of years. And then eventually it made its way to the Burnaby Village Museum.
Wow, interesting. Patrick is hoping to catch another glimpse. Could you please display the slide of the station again? I think it might have been perhaps. We've got lots of questions coming in now. Thank you.
Oh, this one? This is this station at
the end
Road and Canada Way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when the Vorse station was restored at the museum, it was restored to look the same as this one did. It was a common plan that they used for those stations on the Burnaby Lake line. And you just look at the sort of the surroundings. It just feels like nature is going to take over. Spectacular. Yeah.
And Karen's wondering what the average fare to ride the Interurban was.
I know people ask me that, and I don't really know the answer to that. It was relatively expensive. Like it wasn't as affordable in sort of a adjusted for inflation since as our transit service is today. So a lot of people in Burnaby didn't use it for everyday travel. They walked or rode bicycles or found other ways to get around.
Yeah. A question here from AM. What is the preferred name of the Central Park line?
Well, it was known as the Central Park Line for most of its history. I think when it was first built, it was the Vancouver Westminster line or something like that, because it was the only interurban line, the first interurban line that was built in the region, and then later on, when other lines were built and they sort of needed to differentiate it from other lines that went between Vancouver and New Westminster, then it became known as the Central Park Line.
There's another one here. There are some cement foundations west of the Dom Glass factory area in the bushes above Burn Creek.
Yes.
I know what was there. Okay.
Yes. This is the third time I'm going to ask this question in like 2 months. It's fascinating. People are really getting out in the community and seeing things and asking questions about things maybe that didn't happen as much before. So those foundations are part of the Effinger family estate, and they came here in the 1940s, retired from Vancouver to construct an estate. Much closer to the ravine is where their house was located. There was also a barn. The trail into there follows their driveway, and if you're taking the trail into where that structure is, you'll notice the cedar trees all in a line. You can see where the driveway would have been. And that particular L-shaped structure that you're probably talking about, we think was a games lawn. It wasn't the foundation of a building. It only ever seemed to have had two sides. There's nothing was attached to the top of it that we can see, and aerial photographs as well. It looks like it was a flat area, perhaps to play lawn tennis. Mr. Effinger had been quite involved in the lawn tennis association in Vancouver before he moved out here, or croquet, or who knows. But I think that's what its purpose was.
Oh, okay. And just a couple little tips from friends here. Jim is just sharing that the Fraser Valley Heritage Railway in Cloverdale has restored 4 of the cars to operating condition that are running on a small section of track once we're through this period of our pandemic. So, and just one more comment about the Caribou Forest Preservation Society will likely offer tours when it's possible again of the Burnaby Lake line. So just if anyone there is keen.
Cool. What was that group called again, Kate?
It's called, it's from Irene on Facebook. She's just sharing the Caribou Forest Preservation Society.
Okay. I haven't heard of that group. I'll have to, that sounds fantastic. Maybe if there's someone from the Caribou Forest Society on the call, you could let us know who you are.
Yeah, and there's lots of questions, but just one. I'll finish with one really good one. But before I do, everyone's very keen to know more about the family, the Effner.
Oh, the Effner.
How do you spell it? Just very quickly.
Okay.
I'll ask one more.
Effinger. EFF. Effinger. He was a contractor. I think he helped to build some sort of major construction projects in Vancouver, and then just before he retired, they purchased the land on Burn Creek, which was sort of largely undeveloped at that point, that area, and set up their retirement home there. So it must have been a place where friends and family would travel out of the big city to come to rural Burnaby and visit them at the estate. And they planted a couple of walnut trees around that feature that we were talking about, the stone wall, and black walnut trees don't let other plants grow under them. They have I don't want to call it a poison, but something
deterrent.
The self-defense mechanism where other plants can't grow under them. So it's super eerie. When you go there, you're like, what is this? It's this like weird sort of dark space, and you wonder what it is, but it was a games line.
Cool. Okay. Well, our last question. Thank you all. These are fantastic questions. There's lots here, but I just wanted to, if Uta is wondering if you can give any information about the Golf Link station on the Burnaby Lake line.
Golf Link? Golf Link.
Yeah, it says Golf Links, and I don't know if it's something that's on the map or if it's just something that's currently there, you know, more a current thing. But it's also okay if you're not sure.
I do not know.
Any more information. Let's see. Golf Links is near Caribou. I see. So it's Vancouver Golf Club station for the club on Austin Road. Okay, so it's a modern time.
A modern time one. Okay.
I see.
Yeah. Okay.
Very specific. Okay, well, more research to do as always.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, thank you all for your excellent engagement, and Lisa for a very informative, lively, and fun presentation. This, so you all know, this is recorded on Facebook. It's available on our Facebook page. You can go back to it if you missed anything or if you wanted to see something again. Share links with other Interurban fans. But I just want to thank you, Lisa, for being with us, and thank you all for being with us as well. It's great to have so many of you here. And we have our final neighborhood speaker series this coming Tuesday with Denise Fong. She's going to take up the theme that Lisa touched on, the Hastings, the Chinese Canadian greengrocers and market gardens, and expand on that theme and connect it very directly to this presentation here tonight. So you can look forward to that, and all the details are on our Facebook page or on our website. So we hope to see you again. Well, thank you all, and thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. Right.
See you soon.